What is up, everybody? This is JP with jpfitnesspro.com. Here in a couple weeks, I'm going to have some hypertrophy and powerlifting programs up on my website for you guys to purchase. I will also have options for customized programs just in case you have something that you want specifically made in a program, or you have some special circumstances that doesn't allow you to do like a regular program. And also, I should have options for online coaching just in case any of you guys want to get a program but get like one-on-one sessions as well. So again, that's going to be at jpfitnesspro.com. Today's episode of the Exercise Science Podcast is inspired by it was a post in the Research Review Mass Monthly Applications in Strength Sport. It's done by Mike Zourdos, Eric Helms, and Greg Nuckols. Mike Zourdos just did a video on basically how to individualize a program, and even though he named it that, the gist of it that I got from it was, and he mentioned this at the beginning, was that a lot of people tend to use the excuse of, but it works for me, as an excuse to implement things that might not be necessarily correct in their program. And while that article and that video did inspire this podcast, I'm going to be taking my whole spin on it. Again, I'm not affiliated with Mass in any type of way. There's no sponsorship or anything going on here. But again, it just inspired me to do a topic on this. And I don't know what I'm going to call it, but so far the sentence and the gist of it is when people say, but it works for me. And by that I mean is typically when I get into a conversation with someone who's currently working out on a workout program, or they made their own, they explain to me their workout program and they'll tell me the things that they do. And when I see something that's maybe way off or something that just doesn't make sense in any sort of way, I try to be open-minded, and I am. I know there's multiple different ways to make a program. Making a program or individualizing a program is more of an art than actually looking at the science, because you can look at the science and apply it to a program, but again, science doesn't account for, well, it does account for people that are outside the norm, but basically it's almost, science is almost telling you means. They're telling you the average when they tell you something about a topic or a subject. And yes, a lot of the times they'll catch these outliers, but how do we know or not whether or not we're working with an outlier? And that just comes down to the trainer and being able to analyze that person individually. But so again, I am open-minded when it comes to people telling me their program and what they're doing, but sometimes there are things that are just way off. And what I mean by this, and Mike Zourdos, who did the video on this, one thing that he said which I really liked was that humans are very much the same for the most part. There's no, yes, we are individuals. We do have individual traits that are specific to each other, little things, very minute things that are different. You know, the way we gain weight, where we store weight at, a muscle fiber composition, things like that. But ultimately, we are very much the same as a whole. We're not drastically different. It's not like, when someone doesn't work out, one person's going to be able to just instantly rep, 315 for 20 times, and then some person is not going to be able to lift the bar. You rarely see ever, if that at all, some type of drastic difference between two people who haven't worked out. And especially if they're around the same weight, same height, if they're both male or they're both female. But again, humans are very much the same. So the rationale that people use of, but it works for me with things, kind of doesn't, I don't want to say it doesn't hold any weight for the most part, but the things that I see that people tell me, which I'm going to go over in a little bit, they aren't under that umbrella of that, of the individual differences between people. There are still differences though. There are, again, like I mentioned, but from what I've seen and, in the scientific literature from studies, they're minute differences as a whole in between people. Now, when you're looking at a specific small subject, there might be wide differences, but when it comes to huge differences in subjects and things, there's not very big differences. And I know I'm talking very vague, but I'm going to go over specifics in a little bit. And for someone who says, well, it works for me, they might be right. I'm not saying that you're necessarily wrong if you're saying, but this works for me. Again, there are outliers when it comes to averages for things. like for example, I'll give you guys an example, is that for hypertrophy, 10 plus sets a week per muscle group is most optimal. Now, some people may need to do more than that. Some people may need to do less than that. If you see someone doing less than that and you automatically point and say, oh, you're wrong, you know, you shouldn't be doing that, you should be doing more or less, you don't know that, you know, and that's not what I'm advocating here. I'm not saying just go around and tell people they're wrong, you know, let's not be gym police here. You don't know everyone down to the T. So, but again, that I'm saying that there may you might be right. You might be an outlier. You might not be. But again, the things that I'm going to talk about in just a second are things that aren't that. I'm going to go over things that can and are usually individualized between people, and then I'm going to go over things that usually aren't majorly different between people, or they're just really not much different at all, and that they shouldn't be modified to a drastic degree. So I'm going to start right now on the things that usually are individualized per program. And by that I mean is that usually they're going to be different from person to person, and those are the things that you can literally say, but it works for me, and then that would be correct. And these things are usually based off of just normal life experiences, or they're based off things that have been proven in the scientific literature. There's actually a lot of data and science to back it up. And that's usually where you'll find the differences between things that merit the term but it works for me and not, is whether or not it's been proven in the scientific literature, and then the rationale behind it. So to start off, things that actually are individually different between people that can merit that sentence of but it works for me, and we'll start with some programming differences, is time. Some people can't work out the same as other people. They just can't the same length of time per workout or as many times a week as someone else. So if you look at someone's program and say, well, you're not working out a lot, you know, you're not going to see optimal gains, or you're not, you know, working out long enough in the gym, this isn't enough, or things like that. That's something that's completely individualized. You don't know what someone's work schedule is like. You don't know how much time they have available. Maybe they're working 50 plus hours a week, and then they got 3 kids, and they also have another hobby on top of that. So you really don't know what someone's going through. So that's something that's completely individualized per person. Another thing is the goal. I just did a video series on YouTube about, and this is going to be up on YouTube as well, but I just did a couple videos about training to failure. Now, that was specifically aimed towards muscular hypertrophy and strength, not muscular endurance. So if someone's training muscular endurance for a specific sport or something that requires being closer to failure, and their goal is not to optimize hypertrophy or optimize strength, then looking at someone's program and saying, well, you're not supposed to be training to failure, or why are you getting too high, you're getting really high RPEs per set, you're wrong. You don't know what their goal is going to be. You don't know what their goal is. So to criticize someone for that when you don't know what their goal is, it's kind of, it's being a little bit ignorant. You're not knowing what they're doing, and you're making, you know, assumptions on certain things. So goals are going to be different between people, and that's going to influence programs, that's going to influence rep schemes, that's going to influence tempos, it's going to influence intensities, it's going to influence everything. So that's something that is completely individualized as someone's going what they want. And the next thing is for programming differences is injury. Some people may have to program things a little bit different, exercises a little bit different, and remove or add exercise on a case-by-case basis due to past injuries, or maybe not like a full-on injury, but what if they have like a nagging pain that they have currently? So these things are completely individualized, and telling someone or you know, that actually merits the sentence of, you know, but it works for me, because some things, when injuries get in the way, you can't do or you can do. I'll give you guys an example, is bench press. What if you've had a prior injury on the bench press and you either can't do bench press at all, or you can't go all the way down? Let's just say you have to stop halfway. If someone's looking at you or thinking or even tells you, you know, just flat out that, hey, you need to go all the way down, that's such a blanket statement that's not taking the individual as a whole. You know, you have to, again, account for those injuries as an individual, person by person, and think about those injuries when you're making your program. If not, you're going to get re-injured again, or you could just have pain, other things wrong, or decline in performance. A ton of things are going to factor in, But again, injuries are individual from person to person. So like for me, I tend to prefer box squats over regular squats for the most part. Not all the time. I still do regular squats, but it just seems to be a little bit better than me for me because me being in the Marine Corps before, I tore my ACL and my meniscus, and then I had a hairline fracture on the top of my tibia and my left knee. So basically, I just completely destroyed my left knee. Yeah, I fell off an obstacle course, so I can't do every single knee exercise or knee dominant leg exercise that other people can do. So I have to modify things for me. And if someone were to look at my program and say, well, you're not doing enough back squats, or how come you're doing it this way, that doesn't make any sense. Again, they're not looking at my individual injury history and saying, okay, well, that makes sense now. So the next topic of actually backing up the statement, but it works for me, is preferences for fun. People kind of overlook this aspect of a program more than I think that they should, because again, a main problem with people not working out in general is program adherence. If you're doing things that you go into the gym and you absolutely hate doing, then you're not going to want to keep doing it for that long. And for all the people, you serious lifters out there, you put yourself in that position. What if you love lifting but you hate cardio? And what if you had to go in and do just a crumb of lifting, 3-5 sets max, one exercise, and then you had to do cardio for the rest? You wouldn't want to go to the gym. You're like, I love lifting, I want to do deadlifts, I want to do all these things. So it's preferences for fun. Things may not be optimal in someone's program. They may be kind of optimal, but not 100% optimal. But if they like it that way, because if they're openly admitting, or the person writing the program is saying, well, that's not 100% optimal, but they don't like doing the 100% optimal thing, then that's fine. Now, if you're a powerlifter competing for a competition, that's where you have to kind of find that line where optimal may help you win a meet or set a PR. But if you're just someone lifting for, your own goals and you're not competing, then personal preference is a huge factor into what you like doing. Now, again, you still have to meet yourself in the middle. You can't get rid of all the, the core foundational exercises and say, well, I don't like doing squats, deadlift, or bench press. I'm just going to do knee push-ups, leg extensions, and then some light cable rows. And that's the extent that I'll go. And I want to make the best gains ever. You can't do that. But for example, I know a guy at the gym that I go to. He doesn't really like doing back squats that much, because he says, again, nothing against him. You guys can say whatever you want about him, and obviously I'm not going to use names, but he doesn't like doing back squats because he said he doesn't like the bar on his back. It just hurts his back. But he does an alternative, which is front squats, and he front squats a good amount. He can rep out 225 like nothing on front squats. So for him, honestly, I think front squats are harder. They just take a lot more mobility. You have to have a lot stronger core. You need to be able to brace a lot better for front squats, but he just doesn't mind front squats. And again, that's something that he prefers to do. So again, you do have to take that in. So if you're not really aiming for optimal things, then saying that, well, this isn't optimal, but I like it and it increases program adherence, then that's something that, again, is another thing that you can, that actually warrants the statement of, but it works for me. And the last thing I'm going to touch over, and by last thing, I don't mean this is all the things that warrant that statement. I'm just saying these are some of the biggest ones that I can think of that warrant changes in a program on an individual basis. So the last thing that I'm going to go over is biomechanical differences for exercises. And this is a huge one, because people vary drastically when it comes to these things when you look at a person by person case. So, for example, by biomechanical differences, for example, let's look at the squat. And I've done a post about this on my social media platforms. But some people advocate, and I've seen this online, and it kind of makes me cringe when I read it. It's another blanket statement that doesn't take each person on a case-by-case basis. Is you have to squat ass to grass. I don't like that statement. I will argue anyone about it. I completely disagree. Well, some people can't squat ass to grass, and some people can. It's impossible to do that with good form. If you're one of those people with a shorter torso, poor ankle dorsiflexion, and by poor ankle dorsiflexion, I don't mean like the fact that stretching or mobility work will help you. I mean like you have something like structurally, you just can't. You have poor ankle dorsiflexion that you just can't fix. Let's just say you're already stretching it and you can't go anymore. So if you have longer femurs, a slightly shorter torso, and then poor ankle dorsiflexion, there is no way in hell you're going to be able to get ass to grass. There is no way. You can try all you want. You're just not made for squats. I mean, I don't know what to say. Sorry, you're out of luck. I'm kind of in the middle of that. I'm not that bad, but again, I can't get ass to grass personally. I can't. So things like that, and I'll give you another example, and I gave this example earlier, was to limit bench press range of motion. And you may not have an injury, but if you're one of those people with longer arms and a skinnier torso, it may feel like it's bad or it hurts or just doesn't feel right touching the bar to your chest. Even if you have an arch in your low back, even if you take as much of a powerlifting bench press stance as you can, if you're just one of those people that has really long arms and a really skinny torso, if you try to take the bar to your chest, you're going to have like a lot of maybe too much horizontal abduction going on. Your arms going too far behind your body, which again can increase your chances of shoulder injury and just overall just isn't good for your shoulder joints, and has a possibility of tearing a pec, things like that. So when you look at people on a case-by-case basis and you look at exercises, manipulating exercise range of motion and technique like that, in that sort of sense, are things that you need to think about on an individual basis, because again, you can't throw blanket statements out there because everyone's different. If someone who isn't made to go ass to grass on squats is told to go ass to grass on squats, or it doesn't count, and you just do it, then again, if you're going to listen to them because you're letting your ego get in the way, you're just going to destroy your low back. It's just going to lead to a whole host of bad things. Now, those are some of the main things that, again, warrant the statement, but it works for me. Again, those things you can say, this works for me. And again, there are other things, but those are just some of the biggest ones that I can think of. And then again, Mike Zordos goes over some too, and his video in the newest mass issue, I would definitely recommend you guys check that out. But again, I don't want to just cover everything that he covered. He just gave me the idea to do this podcast on this. Now, some of the things that this doesn't work on, and I'm not saying it doesn't work on these things at all. There are things in these categories that you could work, but I'm just talking about specifics in these categories where I hear all the time, but it works for me. When you really look at the scientific literature and the rationale behind it, it doesn't really work like for what they're saying, and there are much better ways to do what they're doing. And the first one, which is a huge one, is nutrition. And by that I mean there are lots of nutrition gimmicks and fads out there that people will do, and you tell them, well, that's not very smart, and then they'll say, but it works for me. And let me give you some specifics. There was a guy that I went to school with, and this is in college, that he told me he would take like fat burning pills, and he would restrict his diet immensely. Like, I'm talking about like around 1,000 calories, maybe even a little less than that. Like, he would tell me he wouldn't eat. And I would just tell him, man, that's not the right way to do it, And then this is after I knew him, we got to talking, and I wasn't, I'm not playing gym police. I don't just walk up to people and say this, but he would tell me that he would be eating very little and be taking fat burning pills. And I tell him that's not the way to do that. And then, the usual response, it might not be word for word, but it works for me. But it'll be something in that line is, he'll say, but I'm already losing weight, or I've lost X many pounds. And I'll, usually just question things and say, well, how long have you been doing it? And they say, well, I just started, or something. It could be lots of things. And then I'll just explain to them, like, rapid changes in diet and acute changes in weight due to rapid changes in diet, like you drastically change your diet, are usually due to just water. Because and this also goes with ketogenic diets too, but again, I'll stick on the supplement thing, is that per gram of glycogen stored in muscle tissue, I if I'm not mistaken, it's 3 to 4 grams of water. So when you're just drastically changing your diet like a ton, then really quickly, again, that's usually answered by just water loss in your body. So saying that, this works because of this, and this, when it's really not the fat burning pills, and you're not losing a bunch of fat, you're just losing a bunch of water, probably some muscle mass, and the fat burning pills probably are just hurting you more than they are helping you, raising blood pressure, messing with your hormones, things like that. You have to kind of take those things into account. And that's just for like that. So basically that one would be like drastic changes in caloric intake. So like people say that they lose weight because they drastically changed their diet recently. That's something that, again, I wouldn't say is good. It's not, you might be losing weight, but are you strictly trying to lose weight? If you're really trying to lose weight, I mean, if you'd be okay, then you could just chop off your leg and then you'd be losing weight. But when people say they're trying to lose weight, they're really not saying they're trying to lose weight. They're really saying that they want to have a better body composition, which is be leaner, less fat, but have increased muscle mass. And cutting your calories to 1,000 or 800 and then dumping all these supplements on yourself at one time isn't the right way to do it. All right, another one in nutrition is the ketogenic diet. Now, in some circumstances, again, I haven't seen much literature on this, but I think there was a few things that I've seen when it comes to burning fat, but I have also seen things against the ketogenic diet. Again, if you guys want a link to the study, let me know, but I've seen things basically on a low carb diet versus a high carb diet. The two groups were in a calorically restricted state, but one had low carbs, one had high carbs. But the group that had, if I remember this correctly, the group that had more carbs ended up losing more weight and felt like they felt more full more often. They didn't feel as lethargic as the group who didn't have carbs, which makes sense, when you eat carbohydrates, it's, even though your body's going to regulate blood sugar normally on its own, just carbohydrates kind of they don't make you feel as tired. Healthy carbohydrates will make you feel more full. They'll make you feel not tired, and again, this is a case-by-case basis. But what I'm saying with the ketogenic diet is that people typically will start a ketogenic diet. They say, oh, look at all this weight loss. But it goes back to the thing I said earlier, was that when you go on a ketogenic diet, per gram of glycogen and muscle tissue is 3 to 4 grams of water. So when you change to a ketogenic diet and you lose 5 to 10 pounds, in the first couple weeks or first, week or something, a couple pounds instantly, they're like, oh, I lost weight, when it's not really weight, or it is weight, but it's weight in water. It's not weight necessarily in fat. And even if someone starts a ketogenic diet and they do lose weight and they continue to lose weight over time, they say, oh, look, a ketogenic diet helps me lose, I'm losing fat, I'm losing weight. But what this comes down to a correlation, not a causation. Typically, people on ketogenic diets watch what they eat. They watch their caloric intake. So, and this is kind of like the whole theme of this claiming that, but it works for me, is that it is kind of like a correlational or versus causation thing. They're saying this thing works for me when, one, how do you really know it works? Are you having some type of very accurate testing measure for this? 2, are you comparing it to other methods? 3, is there scientific literature to back up what you're saying? 4, what's the rationale behind it? All these questions need to be asked about these things. But again, back onto the keto diet is that they lose this weight and they say, well, it's the keto diet. It might not be the keto diet. Have you tried a non-keto diet where you're watching what you eat, where you're in a slightly you're in a slight caloric deficit or a just regular caloric deficit, and eating healthy, like eating healthy carbohydrates, like, with lots of fiber, lots of antioxidants and micronutrients like fruits and vegetables. If you're not, and if you haven't tried that before, how are you going to say that it's the keto diet? It might just be that because the main determinant for weight loss is caloric maintenance. That is the main determinant. You need to eat less calories than you're expending. Than you're expending. So if you're expending 2,300 calories a day and you're eating 1,800 and it's on a ketogenic diet, automatically assuming it's because you're on keto isn't the right thing to do. And again, compounded with the fact that you're losing water, it may seem like it's all magical when usually it's not. It's just people watching what they eat and they're in a calorically restricted state. And I touched on this a little bit ago, but I guess I'll touch on it again, and this is the last thing in nutrition, is it's supplements. And it's the same case I said earlier about fat burning pills. A lot of people take supplements and they say, oh, but I feel like it's helped, or I've seen improvements in my gym. And the main thing behind this, and not many supplements have a lot of evidence to back them up. The only supplement that I know that's been really backed up by evidence, obviously, besides taking gear, is creatine and then protein, like protein supplements. And by protein supplements, I don't mean that they have some special property to them. I mean that they are just a good way to get in some protein if you are cutting and you can't get protein without taking in a bunch of calories from another source. There's nothing magical about them, but I mean that a good source of protein powder is just a good way to get in some more protein. And then creatine. There might be some other supplements like beta alanine, which have been kind of here and there or a little wishy-washy. But again, for most supplements, I haven't seen enough scientific evidence to warrant their usage. But what usually people say is that this works for me, or I feel like it's helped me get stronger, when the main basis behind this statement is the placebo effect. The placebo effect has been proven before in fitness and just in general. Greg Nuckols did a good article on the placebo effect, he did a good article on a study about the placebo effect, and it works. I mean, it works. If you think that something is going to work and you believe that it works, there is a good chance that the fact that you're just thinking that something is going to work, it is going to help you make gains in the gym. And that says a lot. So when someone's taking a supplement, instead of using an anecdotal claim, like a personal claim about a supplement, like, oh, I think it works, or I feel like it helps, just look at the scientific literature. Look at it, try to, do a little bit of your own research on it. Don't take one person's word, look at multiple people. Where are those people getting their opinion from? Just evaluate it with an unbiased stance. Where are these studies to show the efficacy of these supplements? And if there isn't, then why are you taking it? You're probably just wasting your money. It probably just maybe means you need to have a little bit more confidence. But okay, we'll go on to the next one, is exercise selection. And I mean, by exercise selection, I mean, how am I going to word this? About like injuries or exercises that aren't necessarily good for you biomechanically. Okay, that's a better way to put it. And a lot of channels have gone over this. I believe AthleanX has gone over this a lot. I've seen Omar Isuf's channel, if I said his last name correctly, go over some of these things. Jeff Nippard's gone over a few of these. And what I mean is that I see people all the time doing behind the neck pulls and presses, upright rows, sissy squats, etc. Put another exercise in there that's just biomechanically is not good for us. And this goes back to the first statement I said at the very beginning, is that humans are very much the same. I've yet to meet someone with, and again, it's just not good in general. I can't even say if you have enough range of motion to do these exercises, I wouldn't recommend them regardless. But I've heard claims is that there are some people with good enough range of motion to do these exercises, but most people can't. I don't think most people should do these exercises, period. Again, like behind the neck presses. Again, for the range, getting that much of a horizontal abduction of your arm or at the shoulder is not, especially weighted, is just not good it's not good for people in general. It's going to cause a lot of shoulder impingement or worse, other problems in the shoulder. Behind the neck pulls, I think Jeff Nippard went over an article that talked about how behind the neck pulls don't show any more EMG activity in the lats or any other back musculature than pulls in front of the body. And actually that pulls in front of the body were more effective at, recruiting the lats and those specific types of exercises. And I'm not saying necessarily that EMG activity in muscle correlates to, more gains or more strength, but why usually that's the rationale behind people doing behind the neck presses and pulls, is that you get more delts or you get more lats, but there's nothing to show that those modifications to these exercises do those things. Same thing with sissy squats and upright rows, and upright rows is shown to cause shoulder impingement because it's basically a heavily weighted internal rotation of the shoulder, which isn't necessarily good, especially with all these internal type of rotation exercises that people are already doing, like flies and dips and push-ups and bench press. And it's like on top of that, you want to do, weighted, you're doing upright rows where at the top, your shoulder's internally rotated and it's weighted at the same time. So that's probably not, it isn't the best thing for your shoulder. It's harmful for your shoulder over the long term. And another way people like to word these exercises, and this is very, I don't want to say annoying, but It's instead of saying but it works for me, a different way they twist it is saying but I haven't been injured so far, or it doesn't hurt me now. Sometimes things take years to show up. Think of the entire week. If you only do upright rows once or twice a week, of all the hours throughout the week, hundreds of hours, or it's just like over 100 hours, you're not doing upright rows all the time, but doing one to two exercises of upright rows, or just once a week, 3 to 4 sets. Sometimes that little exposure takes a long time, weeks and weeks and months and years to catch up. It's almost like taking a rope and fraying at it little by little, until eventually it just snaps, okay? And sometimes freak accidents just happen. You may not feel any pain. Everybody's different in that regard. And then one day you might just do an upright row and bam, you tear something in your shoulder. So again, the rationale behind these things is that they're good exercises. They activate that specific muscle group more. I haven't felt pain yet, but if biomechanically, if you look at the structure of the human body on top of that, and then understanding that many physical therapists and people explain why these exercises aren't good for us biomechanically, and your only claim to do it is, oh, well, it hasn't hurt me yet. What are you waiting for? Are you waiting for it to hurt you? Then it's too late. That's a little ironic. You're waiting. Most people wait for a bad sign. It's ironic to say, well, it hasn't hurt me yet. You need to stop before it does affect you in a negative way. All right, the next topic is kind of like, it's not like exercise selection, but it's more of form. And this is kind of the opposite of what I said earlier, because people use this as an excuse too. The first part of form is range of motion. And yes, everyone is biomechanically different, but only to a certain extent. I've seen people even try to defend quarter squats many times to saying, oh, they're trying to do this or that, or they're just getting the top portion of the range of motion, but it's such a little tiny range of motion that it doesn't matter. And honestly, a lot of the times, just to be frank, I think that people, when they say that, are just full of shit, because they need to give a reason for why they're quarter squatting that isn't just, oh, I don't want to hit depth. And again, by depth, I mean depth for you with good form. I don't mean ass to grass, but I'm just saying that people use the, I'm different, or I like doing it this way. So they cut range of motion by like 66%. They only do 1/3 the range of motion and say, well, this is what works for me. No. Again, when people do this, they're limiting the work that's done. Work is force times displacement. So you need some type of, there's a certain threshold for a stimulus that you need to be able to see strength gains and see hypertrophy gains. And sometimes people will do this on exercises that don't even warrant limiting of a range of motion, because people, again, aren't that different. And for example, bicep curls. I have yet to meet someone who doesn't have an injury who is a fully healthy individual who can't fully extend their arm. So saying that, oh, you're different. Yes, a squat, which is more complex and involves a lot more joints and, levers, your femur, your torso, your tibia, versus just a curl, which is just a hinged joint, then not going all the way down on a curl, it doesn't warrant the statement of, but it works for me. You think it works for you, but you could be making better gains if you were to go a full range of motion. Now, again, there are sometimes some people do want to do techniques, because exercise variation is a good way to see, to kind of sculpt your body when it comes to hypertrophy, where you might do 21s, 7 top range of motion, 7 bottom range of motion, and then 7 full range of motion. Again, that's different. I'm not talking about that, but I'm saying that range of motion that pertains to every single set that someone does, a normal set for the person. All right, the next one for form is technique. And this one isn't going to be very long, but I do see people who try to throw in some type of technique for them and say, oh, I like doing it this way. And yes, a lot of the times, if you're a very advanced lifter and you've already nailed the basics, modifying and tweaking an exercise to your liking is something that's going to happen. So it's going to happen. And I definitely do recommend that. Everyone is different. But there's limits to that, I've seen people make, weird excuses for just exercises that don't need to be tweaked, or you know, like for example, I've seen people lift. I've seen people do bench press where their legs are off the ground and they're doing abs at the same time. And that's just, but their goal is to get stronger. That's what they've said. They said their goal is to get stronger, strictly stronger, but that's what they're doing. That's not the best way to get stronger. If anything, that's going to hurt your strength. You're just doing too many things at one time. I think it was leg lifts and bench press at the same time is what it was. So doing leg lifts and bench press at the same time isn't going to help your bench press strength, at all. There's plenty of better ways to do that. So modifying an exercise and saying, but this works for me again, you got to look at the exercise as a whole and say, what is my goal? What am I trying to do? Is this the best way to do it? All right, the last couple of things I'm going to go over, I guess, weren't specific to any categories. These are the last two little things that I think don't warrant saying, oh, but it works for me. The first one is, and I just did 2 videos on this, is training at a 10 RPE all the time or training to failure. A lot of people on the internet and YouTube can become pretty cringy about this, and just, I feel like it needs to be beat into everyone's head, not physically, but just like said over and over again, is that training to failure all the time is not good. Again, there are certain circumstances, again, I just did a video on this, there are certain circumstances where training to failure can be implemented that is going to be beneficial. Like, for example, if you're training with lighter loads and you want to see optimal hypertrophy, you need to go close to, if not failure, to see those optimal gains. But if you're training to failure all the time and saying, well, it works for me, or my body responds to this, or these muscles are quote unquote stubborn and I need to, or I'm shocking them, or whatever you want to call it, whatever buzzwords you want to throw around it. If you're training to failure and you think that you need to do that every single time, you're wrong. There's no argument for it. I mean, there's really no argument for it. The literature is pretty clear that training to failure all the time is no more beneficial than training to sub failure, maybe training at 5 to 7 RPEs most of the time. And again, I'm not saying, in the best case scenario for someone training to failure all the time is that they make equal gains to someone not training to failure. Now, like I said, equal. Now, a worst case scenario is you get to an overtraining state, you injure yourself, you make way less gains, and you don't want to work out anymore because you just feel fatigued all the time. That's a worst case scenario. So again, training to failure all the time, remember, I don't mean certain circumstances. There are places that you can train to failure, but again, not all the time. And saying, but it works for me, no, it's you not understanding how the human body works and how to intelligently progress to your goal, how to properly periodize your program, or if you have a coach, or if you're getting your training program from somewhere, they don't know how to write the program correctly. And then another one is weird blocks of programming. I know this might sound like, whoa, weird, like you've heard that before. Yeah, I've heard people have weird phases of programming. They like to throw cool words around it. Like, again, I'm not gonna throw around names. I'm not trying to piss anyone off or just drag someone down, but I've heard someone, and this was on YouTube, say, and this is a pretty big name person, but say that they do a month or two of really heavy training, and then they'll take a month of completely light. They do a month heavy, a month light, like a month like balls to the walls, and a month just real casual. Which, things like that doesn't make any sense. Yes, there are periods for deloads, and there are periods for to kind of back off and to not go crazy. And there are periods where there's going to be higher intensities of a percentage of 1 rep max and higher intensities of effort, which would be RPE. But to just be careful with how you're, programming, how you're making your program, or when you're getting your program from somewhere, just look at it objectively and say, does this make sense? And it kind of sucks because if you're not one to study these types of things, and you're not a big, you're not in the fitness industry yourself, you're not a trainer, and you don't know, you may not know whether or not the program you're getting is set up properly. But I've seen people have just weird blocks of programming, like, extremely high volume at the beginning, like, again, with buzzwords like shocking the muscles and taking months real light and a month real heavy and a month real light, like just back and forth like that. I don't see the rationale behind that. So, yeah, again, just be careful with weird programming methods. And I see it just comes down to, I guess, gimmicks, tricks, and buzzwords. It's almost like someone's trying to sell you some cool thing that's gonna promise instant quick gains, when it's really probably not, and it's probably not based on any scientific literature. Okay, that was the end of today's podcast. Again, the point was just to go over the topic of but it works for me, and to understand that an anecdotal claim doesn't mean that what you're doing is an anecdotal claim is a personal claim. Today's podcast was just to show that saying, oh, this thing works for me. Well, one, how do you know it works for you? Did you compare it to something else? Two, is it based on any scientific evidence? Three, what's the rationale behind it? Why are you doing it? And does it match up with the scientific evidence? Four, just being able to like objectively look at your program and what you're doing as a whole, and where did you get it from? Does it make sense for you as an individual? How does that apply to, you know, people being all the same and you being different? Again, certain things just are the same for everyone, and certain things need to be individualized, which is what I want over here. But again, if you guys like this podcast, please like it down below. If you're at YouTube, share it with a friend. This will also be on my website at jpfitnesspro.com, so you guys can download it. You guys can go check that out there, so you guys can listen to it while you're driving through a car, driving in your car, going somewhere, or if you're at the gym or something like that on the treadmill. Again, here coming in a couple weeks, I'm going to have hopefully both of them up, but right now I'm working on the hypertrophy program first, but I should have shortly after that the powerlifting programs up. I'm going to have probably 4 or 5 of each, depending on where you're at in your training, where you're at in your training and your training age and things like that. But please check that out. Again, just keep checking back throughout the next couple of weeks. It's jpfitnesspro.com. But until then, I'll see you guys next time. Peace.